Hey class, so we spent a few weeks on Illustrator, I think 6 weeks to be exact, so now we're going to be starting a new program called Photoshop. I'm just going to give you a brief tour of what Photoshop is, what the tools it really focuses on, and just how powerful this program is. Now the good thing about learning Illustrator first and then going into Photoshop is you can work with those two programs in tandem. So if you started something in Illustrator and you want to add more to it in Photoshop, you can definitely do that, and both programs are designed that way. So I've opened Photoshop. As you can see, I've had a few series of projects open, and if you haven't opened Photoshop before, you'll probably see something different, so you'll probably see different size variations on what kind of file you'd like to open, which is fine. So those are a series of files that I've recently opened. What I'd like to do is open up a new document, so I'll just go create new, and just like in Illustrator, you have various different kinds of formats for your file. So you've got your print format, your art and illustration format, you've got your web format, mobile, and film. And they've already customized those sizes for you, as well as the resolution and the units of measure, as well as the color mode. So you don't necessarily need to customize your workstation. I'm going to go into print, and I'm going to stick to letter. So as you know, it's 8.5 by 11, keeping the orientation at vertical, and the resolution defaults at 300, which is a good resolution. And we're always in RGB mode, which is red, green, blue, versus Illustrator. Illustrator is CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. This cyan, magenta, yellow, and black is used for print. RGB, red, blue, red, green, blue, is used for screen. All right, and we'll talk about those differences once we get into the details of when they'll be used. But for now, we're going to stick to RGB, and we're going to hit create. And now I have my workstation set up, and just like in Illustrator, looks very familiar, nothing intimidating. What you'll notice is, again, your tools are on the right-hand side right here, okay? So you have, again, the same method where you hover over something and it'll tell you what it is. So we have the move tool, we have the rectangular marquee tool, and we have a polygon lasso tool, and we have all those different kinds of selection tools. We have the cropping tool, which is very powerful. We have the frame tool, and something which is pretty cool is the patch tool, which allows you to, let's say, take off a pimple off of a photo, someone having to just recreate a little bit of touching up. That's something that you can do, but it also has a lot more features to that. We have our paintbrush, like in Illustrator. We have the clone tool right here. And what's great about this little preview is it actually shows you what each tool does. This did not exist before in Photoshop, so this is great. You can actually just hover through all of them and really see what you can do with these different tools. And within each tool you have a sub-menu where you can pick different tool sets. All right. The history brush tool, you can go back and repeat certain types of painting strokes. You have the eraser tool. You have the paint bucket tool, which allows you to paint in certain areas, backgrounds, foregrounds. You have the smudge tool. This is good for when you're really doing some heavy photo editing in shadows and lights. You have the sponge tool, which changes the saturation of areas in certain places of the image. And then you also have, if you go down, the burn tool, which tends to kind of lessen the color. So the sponge tool picks up the color, the burn tool tends to darken, right? We have the pen tool like we have in Illustrator. We have the type tool. We have the path selection tool. We have the ellipse tool for drawing shapes, the rotate tool, and you have the magnifying glass, the zoom. And then you can also edit your toolbar here. Okay, so you can put as many tools as you want out here or as less as you want. And just like in Illustrator, you can toggle between the foreground and background. This right here is your mask. You can work in a quick mask mode, which I'll explain as to what this is in detail. And you can also change your screen mode. So let's say you wanted to work in a different screen mode. So what I did now was I can go into full screen. I don't want to see any of my tools except it hides. It's the genie bar right here. Right? So I want to do that again, and I want to decrease my screen. So I have different options. When I hold this down, it tells me standard screen mode, full screen mode with menu bar, without menu bar. So I have options as to how I want my workspace to be and curate it to my liking, depending on what it is I'm doing, and also depending on your comfort level of how you like to work. Alright, so I finished with the toolbar area right here. Then we go into this area right here where we start looking at our basic tools right here. Now we start looking at our menus. Here is where we get our color and swatches, just like we had in Illustrator. And then you'll notice that there's a lot of different types of effects that we use in Adobe Photoshop. So, you know, whenever you have a certain filter, you can always customize that, and you can park those different menus right here. So let's say I wanted to take a look at something which is, let's say, the Gaussian blur. Right? So I obviously need to have something out in order for it to appear, but usually what happens is I'll have a menu pop up, and I can park this menu right here. So just like the type tool, like that, I can go in there and I can actually park it in here and refer to it whenever I need it. Alright? So that's the good thing about how the Photoshop program works. It still works similar to how Illustrator works, right? I would say that the biggest thing that you would have to work with in Photoshop is you have to get used to working in your layers palette, and you're going to be using your layers palette quite a bit. Just like in Illustrator, you have certain things that you want to do in layers. Now, the focus with Photoshop is you work in pixels, right? In Illustrator, you worked with vector images. So that means with vector images, you can scale them up and down as much as you want. You can't do that in Photoshop. Once you take a pixel and you blow it up, you're going to see pixelation, because this is not what this program does. If you want to recreate shapes and you want to scale them up and down as much as you want to do that in Illustrator. Photoshop, I recommend that you already have your sizes set up, and what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're working with different types of effects, and you're working with different types of tools that are different than that you would find in Illustrator. Okay, so you usually start off with the default, which is your background layer right here, and it's usually locked. To unlock it, you just double click and the lock goes away, right? And once you unlock, you get those different types of layer styles that you can do. Now, you will be able to work with these types of styles once you have an image set up and you start working with what it is that you want to create. You can do a color overlay, you can do an inner glow, an inner shadow glow, or you want to do an outer glow, or drop shadow, or gradient overlay. So you have a variety of different things you can do with each of your layers. So each layer can have a different effect, and it's normal to have 20 to 50 layers with different types of things going on, but don't worry, it's not something complicated, and it doesn't have to be. You're in control here, all right? Those are just the different types of tools, shortcuts for your filters. Right here you have different filters that you can bring about to the different types of images you bring in. All right, and you have also another layer right here, which is the mode, where you can darken, you can multiply, color burn. So a lot of different effects that can happen on different types of layers. So this will be the most important part of Photoshop, not Illustrator. This will be one of the most important things you will be working on is your layers palette. And you want to make sure you're working on multiple layers, because if you work on just one layer, you will notice that all your things tend to lock up easily and it's very difficult to edit and erase. So you want to make sure that when you have different things on different layers, it makes things a whole lot easier for you to work with. I will explain in the next video. This was just a brief tour of Photoshop, okay? And I will show you some of the capabilities that this program has in terms of examples and what it can do.